Hello everyone. LangChain just released the V10 alpha of the LangChain library, and it comes with a lot of changes. But is it good? Is it different? And should you use it? I'm gonna do a short walkthrough in this video about the library, the changes, and try to decipher that. Maybe we should start with a little bit of history. LangChain was maybe the first framework for LLMs. It grew in popularity like crazy in 2023. Everybody who was building agent or playing around with LLMs was using LangChain. It moves very quickly, and at some point it was almost unusable. There was a lot of blog posts. I think one of the big blog posts to hit was from Octomind about why they don't use LangChain for building AI agents. The last, I would say, 6 months, there was a lot of hate for LangChain. A lot of people just took it out of production. And the reason, because it was extremely messy. It was changing very quickly, the documentation was not up to date, and it was building, honestly, abstractions for, it was basically trying to do everything. And it was not doing it very well. And at some point, they even tried to introduce kind of new things, like this LangChain expression language, which, to be honest, I still don't understand. Basically, it's a way to kind of create chains of prompts. But instead of using some kind of Pythonic way, they overload this pipe operator so that they can create chains of things. And I mean, it's an interesting idea, but simply that's not why you need a framework for. So at some point, everybody started ditching LangChain. And to be honest, I think everybody started ditching frameworks and just using OpenAI directly, or things like LightLLM. LightLLM, for those who don't know, basically allow you to switch models very quickly. Basically, people were asking, it's like, why do I need even a framework to build AI agents? I can orchestrate things very easily. I mean, gluing a couple of calls is simple, and therefore I just jump to using the chat completion endpoints or something where with LightLLM that kind of allows me to jump between models very quickly. And I think all that hate for LangChain was the reason for this change. And I think the team at LangChain just kind of realized that. I mean, I saw this post a week ago from Harrison, the CEO of LangChain, basically asking, what do you think of LangChain? When you think of the LangChain, the library, which part of it do you think about? And I feel all of basically this resulted into kind of this LangChain 1.0. It's a new library to some degree. If we jump to the documentation, the first thing we see, it's a totally different abstraction. Basically, the quick start now for LangChain is that you create an agent where you provide a model, tools, and a prompt, and then you can invoke it. And in fact, this actually was part of LangGraph. I don't have the example here, but this kind of function create agent was part of LangGraph, and they moved it to LangChain. So basically they created kind of two paths. If you want to have kind of the simple agents, you go with LangChain. If you want to build something a little bit more complex and more customized, then you go with LangGraph. The other thing that you noticed, at least in this quick start, is that now when you're invoking things, actually you're using kind of a list of messages in the usual OpenAI structure. If you remember previously, they had this kind of human message and user message, and I think they still have them in some places, but it looks like much more similar to the OpenAI. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that this looks a lot like now Pydantic AI and OpenAI agents. And I'm going to jump to OpenAI agents to kind of show how this looks. So you can see the example here for the OpenAI agent SDK, and it's kind of the same abstraction with different words, right? So you specify an agent here, you provide the instruction, and then you run it with this kind of run sync or run async. And you can have the same with tools here, right? So here's kind of an agent that uses a function, a tool, kind of get weather. And you can see here the same thing. It's an agent that has an instruction, it uses a model, and then it has a list of the tools that are automatically kind of inferred from the decorator. And if we jump to the quick start here, the example from LangChain V10, we see exactly the same thing, right? I mean, it's a different way to determine or describe the model, but then it's the same idea that you can provide a tool here without the decorator. I think if we jump here, we're going to find that they provide a decorator with kind of more information about name and description and so on. But it's the same abstraction that you would find in OpenAI agents. And if we jump to Pydantic AI, it's exactly the same, with some differences, right? I think the main difference is about how they propagate context, which kind of built-in tools exist, or built-in kind of functionalities exist. So for example, with here the LangChain V10, we see that they provide kind of this short-term memory as a checkpoint. They provide this also with agents, but in a very different way, which they call sessions, and they save as SQL sessions. So there are kind of minor differences, but at the end of the day, it's converging. We're reaching a point where whether you're using LangChain, OpenAI Agents SDK, Pydantic AI, the Google ADK, I think, it's more or less the same thing. Now, the other thing that you notice is that, honestly, from the documentation perspective and the clarity, it's much, much clearer than what we had before. The core concepts are simple, right? You can use different model. You have here messages, the tools, what we've seen a little bit before. We have agents, which are basically prompts, right? It's prompts that are orchestrated, and the ability to run things with streaming and so on, with the ability to get stuff with structured output. Now they have here this kind of multi-agent. I saw a little bit in the reference. It's kind of swarms, so it's a little bit similar to what you have in the OpenAI agents, where basically you can have multiple agents that hand off things to each other, but kind of described in a little bit different way. So it becomes clear, why do I need this and what is the value of this? It's mainly the orchestration. So they removed all the connector libraries, the built-in tools, put everything outside. And I think they started doing it a little bit a while ago. And they focused on the main value, which is I want to orchestrate things. Meaning if I have an LLM call, a completion call that has, let's say, a tool basically call, I want the library itself to go call that tool, get the answer, and then provide it back to the LLM. I don't want to do it myself. That's the first thing. And I think the other one, and that's honestly very easy to implement. The other one, which can be a little bit trickier, is the whole parallelization of this orchestration. Basically, if you want to call multiple tools, maybe you want to call them in parallel and then get the answer. If you have a guardrail, for example, like another LLM checking the answer, basically you want to do it in parallel while making your call so that you don't add latency, and if it doesn't work out, you kind of return that. So I think all of these things, especially if you connect them with streaming, makes things a little bit complex if you're building them in-house, and make these frameworks kind of interesting. But then the question, should you now use LangChain? I think it's a little bit early to say. I mean, it's in the alpha version, but I feel we're reaching a point where it does not matter that much which framework you're using. I think you should use something that is robust, battle-tested, probably with a big team, some funding behind it so that it kind of keep being updated. Obviously open source, but whether you're using LangChain, Pydantic AI, OpenAI SDK, at least at this stage, I don't see much difference. Now, my personal opinion is there should be something simpler. I feel the agent abstraction is a little bit too much. At the end of the day, an agent is simply a prompt. Why do we need to call it differently? I would rather have a library where I can call the completion endpoint in the OpenAI format and then kind of call another function that orchestrates the next steps accordingly. I don't know if that exists, at least I didn't find it yet, but I feel I don't need these abstractions to write agents. I prefer to use the LLMs as they are. Because one of the disadvantages of using these frameworks is that you are stuck with these. It's tricky to move to LangChain to OpenAI SDK if at some point you don't find it fit. So I would prefer always to use the lowest level of abstraction, which is kind of the chat or responses API. I hope you like this short walkthrough. If you want to watch similar content, just subscribe to the channel and see you around.